News. Just found out that the New Orleans Pelicans are hiring Jason Williams as their next head coach. So congratulations, sir. Glad to have you. All right, let's go ahead and get things started. Looking forward to talking about this big conversation when it comes to criminal justice reform, especially in our city. And we have some amazing folks that are going to be up here in just a matter of seconds to talk all about the things that we're dealing with now and what we're hoping to deal with in the future of 2025 and hopefully make some good positive changes in this city. You guys ready? All right, so I'm going to call up our panelists right now. First one, of course, is Sheriff Susan Hudson. District Attorney Jason Williams. State Senator Royce Duplessis. Troy Glover. Mary Chastain. And of course, Miss Sarita Stibe. One more big round of applause for our panelists who took time out of their busy schedules to join us today. Alrighty, thank y'all so much for joining us. Once again, congratulations, Mr. Williams, on being the next head coach of the Pelicans. By the way, they've lost 10 in a row, so we need it. But one of the biggest things I want to talk about today is some things we've been learning, especially when it comes to statistics here. Earlier this year, in March of 2024, data showed that Black residents in New Orleans are jailed at 4.3 times the rate of white residents. Even more troubling, 92% of people detained in Orleans Parish Jail were being held on open cases awaiting trial. These numbers show us how systemic inequalities continue to shape the justice system. So today, it's just really not about just data, it's about people, stories, and solutions. Each of our panelists you see on this stage brings a unique perspective to this issue, and together we'll explore how we can reimagine a justice system that prioritizes fairness, restoration, and hope. So let's get things started, shall we? All right, so one of the first things we want to jump to is framing the problem. So I want to start with you, DA Jason Williams. We know that systemic inequalities are deeply rooted in our criminal justice system. For example, Black residents are incarcerated at disproportionately high rates, which has ripple effects on families, communities, and opportunities. As leaders in this space, when it comes to prosecuting crimes and other things, what do you see as the most significant barriers to meaningful prison reform, and how do we start to break them down?
I think first and foremost is being honest about how we got here and being honest about the why and honest about the real solutions to get away from it. First of all, the criminal legal system was racist and sexist from inception. When you look at the nature of law enforcement entities that exist in the Deep South, they were caught to catch Black folks. Whether it was, and after slavery, you saw the prison industrial complex become the new place for that labor, right? These decisions were made largely by white men, women, and other people who were white male property owners were removed from creating these laws, right? And so we still all live with the laws that were put on the books from that time period. And then there's the role of the courts, there's the roles of the DA, there's the role of media. Because a lot of times, folks in certain media outlets would have us think that crime is only committed by folks with brown skin. You see how quickly you see a picture pop up when there's a horrible crime, when it depicts a certain person, but when it happens somewhere else, there's no picture. When a horrible crime happens in Shreveport, National News says just outside of New Orleans. That's not happenstance. And so it's important that we make sure that folks who live in the poor neighborhoods, they want criminal justice reform because they want to see the wrong people taken to jail, but they also want to see the right people held accountable that are wreaking havoc. So it's important for us to dissect and do a real autopsy about how we got here so we can figure out the right way to get out of it.
Absolutely. And for those watching, the way I do panels, I don't like to go from person to person. I will jump around, keep this thing moving. And also, if there's anything that you all want to jump into, if Senator Duplessis says something that you want to chime in on, feel free to let me know. We can get right to it. Speaking of Senator Duplessis, I want to get to you because obviously we know that. There was a session talking about criminal crime in the state of Louisiana, more specifically, I guess we could say, in the city of New Orleans. And that passed overwhelmingly by, of course, a Republican-led Congress. Talk about what you're seeing on your end when it comes to people in your district, and do you think that the folks in Baton Rouge are in touch with what the issues are in your district and also in Orleans Parish?
Great question. I think it goes back to part of what our DA just said, talks about being honest. It's important to be close to the problem if we're trying to come up with solutions, and I think those who are closest to the problems are best suited to be able to weigh in on how we solve this issue. The narrative of fixing New Orleans is not a new one, particularly at the state capitol, and it's not unique to Louisiana. Most conservative states that have majority black, majority brown cities, progressive cities, Democratic-run cities, in conservative states like Louisiana have historically always labeled us as crime-ridden, as cities that can't govern themselves, and as cities that need more penalties and all the things that we know. We had some progress back in 2017 when we had a new governor that really embraced the idea of criminal justice reform. We are no longer in a criminal justice reform space. We made a 180-degree turn with the new administration and this super red, super majority legislature to not only repeal the smart laws that we passed back in 2017,
I want to talk to you, Sheriff Hudson, about what's going on. I mean, a lot of these folks are going to your jails. What are you seeing when it comes to your standpoint? And also, do you think that what we're experiencing here in the state of Louisiana, especially with the bills that became law from this previous session, do you think it's a good thing for your parish or not?
So it's not good for this parish because this parish said they wanted something else. So a roadmap created, and it was about how you, because we had, for a city that's 500,000, that's way out of proportion. Everybody went to jail. Look at these roadmaps, and they're out there in the records of City Council. The St. Charles Center for Action and Faith has it out there. It's about how the criminal legal system right sizes itself and then is more efficient and more restorative in what it does. So the way you do is you make sure you don't bring people into the system who don't need to be in there, right? So we don't put people in jail now for fines and fees and for tickets and all the things people used to sit in jail for. Now we hold people, we need to be holding people who make us unsafe in society, the violent folks. It talks about bail reform, right? We started all down that road. So everybody actor in the system, from the sheriff, the DA, the public defender, the legislature, the community has a role to play in keeping people out of the system and having restorative practices to get them to a safer life. Because the people who end up in the jail are the people out in society who are not safe, right? They don't have homes. A lot of homeless people cycle in and out of the jail. Mental health, I'm the largest provider of mental health in the city and one of the largest in the state. Should that be like that? It should not. There should be mental health available in the community for loved ones, for families to be able to manage that. I've had to manage loved ones with a diagnosis, and you need help to do that. So we're supposed to be doing all those things and making the system efficient so that it operates quickly. Justice is swift, not just for the people in our custody, but for the victims and survivors of crime. And we center our approach on them and what they need. So those are all some of the things that we need to do to right size who's in the system, and then to be really effective on restorative practices for those who we have in the system.
Sarita, I want to talk to you now when it comes to the situation here. Faith in having that center moral compass, if you will. Talk about how important it is for us to have some type of faith-based something, initiative or whatever, to really play a role in helping when it comes to criminal justice reform in our city.
I think faith is like extremely important. Myself, as a former incarcerated person, I did almost 10 years in prison. I went at 19 and got out at 29. The first memory that I have while I was incarcerated are women coming to the jail, standing on the other side of the bars with Bibles, and telling us that Jesus loves us and they love us and they want to be a part of, our journey throughout incarceration.
Absolutely. Mary, I want to kind of talk to you because I want to kind of move things over to where it kind of starts, I guess you could say, young people, the youth. For folks who don't know, Mary does an amazing job when it comes to helping, kids, counseling and things like that, especially when they're going through the lowest moments of their lives. I want to ask you, the school to prison pipeline remains a pervasive issue, particularly for communities of color. So what proactive measures can we take to engage and empower our youth, ensuring that they see pathways to success rather than incarceration?
Thank you for that. Yes, I mean, the school to prison pipeline is real, and it's very concerning. And I think the more that we can do, we know when a young person or any one person feels a sense of belonging somewhere, they're more likely to be there and be a contributing member of that entity. And so I think a lot of times I think about our young people who don't do well in school or who might have challenges in school. And I used to be a teacher, I used to be a school administrator. I know that knee-jerk reaction of, the other kids can't learn if this person's doing X, Y, and Z. But I've seen it time and time again as a social worker who provides therapy at the JJIC to young people, providing in the community, that when we push our kids out of school and we don't support them to stay in it, we're literally should just be handing them over. And so I think that's a lot of work that we try to do, and how do we support schools to create better and more sustainable systems to support our kids if they have special needs or if they don't have special needs, and create a sense of belonging there. I think one of the things in my therapeutic toolkit when I think about some of our young people leaving JJIC or some of my young people I was working with in a high school that then went in, part of their treatment plan when they come back is having that hard conversation with the band director or the coach or and saying, like, I understand you have to have a policy around, how you want people in your group to participate and engage. But if they're coming back out of a secure facility and band or cheerleading or basketball or soccer or whatever it was is a lifeline to them, please extend that lifeline again. Let's re-engage them in the school community and have them feel welcome and successful back in that school community, so that they're more willing to, likely to go to school and not be having extra time on their hands to get into activities that aren't always safe.
Absolutely. And Troy, with these kids, I mean, the things that they see at the age of 8, 9, 10 years old, I mean, the mentality, a lot of them have a 25, 26-year-old mentality because of the things that they deal with at home or other places. Talk about the importance of having positive mentorship, especially black men in this city, of seeing, 3 black men, 4 black men here on this stage, and just seeing that and saying, I want to be the next district attorney of Orleans Parish. I want to be the next state senator. Talk about how important representation is in showing these young black men what they can be if they really put their minds to it.
Yeah, I think the first thing we have to acknowledge is that New Orleans is a particularly tough city for young people. When we're operating in a city where almost 50% of the young people live in poverty, that's a real stat to digest. And I think it's always good to get a sense of the folks who are in the room and how the lived experiences of people that are part of our ages and churches across the city play a great role in shaping young people. If folks in this room, if you either have been impacted by the criminal legal system or know somebody that's impacted by the criminal legal system, raise your hand. Now, we look around, right? That's probably 80% of the room.
Yeah.
Right. That's a clear link to an impact on our young people. When we know that if a young person has a child, if a young person has a parent that's been impacted by the criminal legal system, they are 7 times more likely to be impacted by it themselves. And I'll say that again. That means if any of our babies have a parent that's been impacted by the legal system, they are 7 times more likely to go to jail themselves. These are real stats that impact our babies. And I was fortunate to be able to graduate from the best school in the city, which we agree, McDonald 35. And you,
I don't know, a little mixed crowd there. I don't know.
these
Yeah. Okay. I heard a St. Aug Purple Night in the back. I don't know, man. I don't know.
My point being that if I did not have the support of the educators at McDonald 35, I was arrested when I was 17. My mama was on drugs. I was 25. My dad got killed when I was 1. So I was one of the young people that got caught up in the criminal legal system, but it was because of the church, my school, and community that stepped in. I think when we have this conversation around young people and their intersections with the legal system, the question I always ask is, do we think young people are inherently born to do bad things? When a young person is born, when a black child is born, are they born to commit a crime? And I believe the answer is no. Then there's something that happens along the way that causes something bad for our young people, and we have to do more of a job investing in that than life and love.
Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
I want to jump in because this is an important point. You asked the question, the foundation of it was based in race, as many of the questions have been. A lot of people want us to move past the conversation of race. I'm not one of those people. The reason is because you walk into JJIC today, at this very moment, and you're going to see nothing but young black boys in there. Period, point blank. So while I know it's uncomfortable for us to talk about race, the fact is we can't just talk about it on these panels. When it comes time for us to talk about leadership and people in positions to make decisions, it matters that we have a black male DA in this city. I believe that. It matters that we have a black woman sheriff in this city. It matters. Now, policy decisions matter too, but representation matters, and it can't just matter on panels.
Go ahead. This is what I like about a moderator.
So what I want to say as well is that I know a lot of times we think about crimes and violent crimes, and when we think about that, you're picturing black men and boys. But what's often left out of the conversation is that black women specifically, are going to prison at a rate 2 to 1 of black men currently right now, presently. Incarceration rate of women has risen 840% over the last 40 years. Our girls are going to prison for more violent offenses. So when Troy says, do we believe that our behaviors are inherently bad? That's the same question that I challenge you to ask yourself about women. Are the women today any worse than women were 40 years ago? And if you say no, then you know we are now criminalizing women for survival crimes, for their mental health. 70% of the women that are incarcerated at the Louisiana Correctional Institution today, presently, have a diagnosed mental health condition on paper. Diagnosed, 70%. 95% of women, girls who are incarcerated have a documented instance of trauma, whether that's physical or sexual abuse, and we often say the other 5% just didn't report it, right? So we know that this is a receptacle, not just for our men and boys, because our men and boys stats are very similar as well. But when we think about who we're incarcerating, who we're locking up, a lot of times the conversation are focused on men and boys, and it needs to be focused on all black people, because we're all
Sarita, I want to stay on that for a second. You talked about mental health, right? We all know it's getting better in the black community, but it's a big issue when it comes to our community, when it comes to mental health. Whenever you say, hey, I want to go see a therapist, you might have maybe somebody who may be old school saying, you crazy. You're not crazy. All you need is prayer. I want to turn things over to you when it comes to mental health and how important it is for folks out there dealing with it, how they need to get that help whenever they do feel as though they need to get it, because that's been a big issue. Mental health, and a lot of black women and black boys are going to the justice system because of trauma, things they might have seen, things they might have heard or had to deal with at a young age that had a major impact on them in their teens and 20s.
I think like the panelists earlier, what they've done is like pointed out a lot of history, right? Our history around mental health services and access to mental health services is when we had a governor by the name of Bobby Jindal. He closed all of the mental health facilities in the state of Louisiana. So there's not a place where our families can go to receive treatment, mental health services. And as the sheriff mentioned before, the jail, I just got mentioned prison should not be burdened with housing people with mental health conditions because they are functionally unable to support people going through mental health crisis. It's an unfair situation that the sheriff, the prisons, and everybody is placed in to manage anybody's mental health conditions. You don't have the proper medications, the proper therapies, none of those things. So now you're releasing people back out into the community with additional trauma, additional mental health issues that they now have to deal with. So when you say people are getting out and they commit more crimes, it's not just survival crimes, it's also crimes because their mental health has not been taken care of, addressed, or even acknowledged.
Absolutely. And Sheriff, you wanted to respond to that as well.
Yeah, I wanted to echo everything my sister Sarita Stibe said here and put together what the senator said as well a minute ago when we talk about race. When whites have a crisis like the opioid crisis, there was treatment. When we had the crack epidemic, what happened? We went to prison, jails, sentences. The disparities between powder cocaine and crack cocaine, all those things are real. So that's what we see here. So, and she talked about this, Governor Jindal decimating the mental health systems. But right now, I'm being made to build a mental health jail for the most acute diagnosis in this community. But I'm not being, I wanted to fight that. I fought it legally and lost, but I want to build a mental health facility that you don't have to come to jail to get services for. We're lost because, again, black people get the criminal justice system and whites get treatment and something outside that system. We got to fight against this. We've got to bring back mental health systems. I'm going to be advocating that in my second term because I'm going to be fighting for mental health in this city. That's what I ran for sheriff for. This is the story of my family. It's the story of your families too. So we've got to come together and not let them divide us and get us to do these things to each other and know that we've got to have the treatment aspects.
Troy.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'll add is I think it's easy. I want to applaud the sheriff for taking that stance. It's not easy to take hard stances on issues that impact people. And I think when we're outside of the building, when we have the conversation around being tough on crime, no one's saying that people who make bad decisions shouldn't be held accountable. For the folks who do things to harm our communities, they should absolutely. But that's on average, most of the people who coming back to community. And so we have to make the decision, are we going to do everything we can to support the people who we know will return affecting the families and the lives and the households of the folks in this room and across the city. So I think let's not let it stop here around these conversations, crime and locking everybody up. Even though that's a hard conversation, I think we have to continue to push forward and actually talk about the facts when they try to throw all this craziness in the mix. Talk about the facts and how this impacts black families and black lives.
Mary, I want to
Daryl, can I
go
just-
ahead, go ahead, because I was going to get to you next.
Just on the mental health piece, I think there's a finer point that our community needs to. It's not just schizophrenia and being bipolar. There are degrees of mental health that we need to address. When there's a school shooting in Rhode Island or Connecticut or Denver, sometimes they tear the school down because of the trauma that is impacted. Kids, social workers descend on the school and give them treatment. In the black community, in New Orleans, you might see a t-shirt with the loved one's name on it. What does that tell you? That person has been touched by trauma. In some instances, they were present for the crime. There was a young man who witnessed his siblings murdered by a cousin who was released too soon from a mental institution. Okay? A year later, his mother was killed in a card game in front of him. There was no intervention. There was no therapist. There was nobody in that school who took that young man and spent some time with him to explain to him that that degree of violence is not normal and there's a way out of it for you. Everybody responds well to intervention when they get it. That young man, fast forward 3 years later, shoots another young man in the back while trying to rob him. All that's connected. And so what I want to make sure is when we talk about mental illness and mental health, that we don't think about it in terms of the extremes. Any form of trauma, if you're in a home where there's domestic violence and you're 4 years old, it's impacting you because the people who find themselves in violent relationships on either side oftentimes saw it as young people. So we need to realize that that intervention is necessary, and that's what Desmond Tutu told us. We can't just keep pulling people out of the river. We got to do that, but sometimes we have to go upstream and figure out why they're falling in the river in the first place.
Go ahead.
Yeah, 100% agree. And Darryl, earlier, the sheriff said that we've all been impacted, and I think it's reflected by the fact that we've all jumped in on this question, and that's the truth. Everybody here on this panel, everybody here in this audience, I think has been touched in a way. I think as a society, we've made a lot of progress. As a community, we've made a lot of progress with being able to talk about mental health more freely without judgment, but we still clearly have a long way to go. I mean, like, we still talk about it, but it's still hard to get over that label of, such and such, they crazy, right? There's still a barrier there, and there's absolutely a barrier in terms of resources, right? I mean, my family dealt with it in the worst way. I have a cousin who was suffering, and, next thing you know, pills led to whatever it led to, which led to an intra-family murder where my mom's youngest brother was killed by his own son, my first cousin. So the family, myself included, could not find any help for DJ. We're talking about a kid who was well-educated, came from a loving home, and I'm just of the belief that anybody, any young person that goes out and commits a crime, it could be an armed robbery, it could be just pulling on door handles. Something is happening in that kid's life that leads them there, whether it's economic trauma, whether it's abuse, or something that they've experienced. And if we don't have the proper interventions or systems in place to get to them early and really treat all of this like a behavioral health, mental health issue, we're still going to be responding in the wrong way. So, and I'm just talking about it on the front end, because once we went through the process of, the awful process of going through the courts and, okay, now what are we going to do? Then there's no real treatment on the back end. So not only was there not treatment for him on the front end, and we lost 2 family members as a result of this, so now he's in a scenario where he's probably not getting the treatment on the back end either. So I think we've made some progress in being able to talk about mental health and trauma and the impacts, but the actual substantive intervention is still lacking.
Let me get back to Mary, because you deal with this every day as well. I mean, all of you are on the front lines when it comes to this issue. When you go to these schools, when you talk to these kids who might be, dealing and grieving after losing a classmate or a loved one or any other issue, is there something in your brain that says, man, we need more of X here to help these kids. We need more of X, Y, and Z to make sure this child and these children, these schools, and other places in this parish are set up to succeed. If there is something, what is it in your eyes?
I think some of our schools in the city are actually doing a really good job at attempting to staff at appropriate levels for mental health professionals within their school setting. But I do think, when it comes to kind of systems and thinking of systems, there are some pretty innovative solutions in other cities. So, for example, if there is a shooting or a crime and you have police that come to that scene and they can see that there's young children or children there that are impacted by that, they've coordinated some care to where they're able to get to the SRO, the school resource office, and kind of pass this child off as handled with care. And that is a great way, in an awful circumstance. We would like to think that no matter what's going on, we'll all be handled with care. But that is a really specific intervention of knowing that the day after an event or something like that happens, the child is probably going to be dysregulated and probably going to have a hard time there. So having that coordinated effort of being able to say we've got all these different members of the community. I often hear it from social media or other places, like first, of this is what happened, and part of my work is to go into schools and to support them that day. I think what I see in a lot of our youth is when you have had so many back-to-back losses, you really start to have this sense of foreshortened future. And so as Royce was saying, that kind of whatever, if you're pulling car door handles or whatever you're doing, that sense of foreshortened future will make those kind of weighing the consequences seem less meaningful. And so it's not uncommon that, we'll see two of the major things that we see as a manifestation of trauma can be aggression or irritability. And so that can often kind of lead down that path. I think I always hate when I leave a school after a tragic incident and I know that they're not going to have the proper support to do a group or to do something to follow up with that. What part of my job is usually making a list of to the school, like, this is who you really need to keep an eye on, because I've seen it happen time and time again, particularly when treating young people who have lost their parent to violent crime. I want to bubble wrap them because it feels like a matter of days or months or weeks sometime before they are going to find themselves in a similar situation. A lot of trauma happens in relationship, and that's also where healing happens, is in relationship.
Absolutely.
So having support groups, having mentors, having therapists is incredibly important, not just the day that it happens, but in the coming weeks, the coming months,
And we'll get Sarita has something to say. Are you guys learning a lot today when it comes to this panel? You guys relate to it? Awesome. Good. Sarita has something to say.
I just wanted to add that a lot of times, I myself, I don't come from the normal socioeconomic background people associate with prison. When I went to prison, my mom was a judge. My dad was a supervisor at an oil refinery, so we had the socioeconomic means, but I was also diagnosed with PTSD at the age of 14 due to violence in my home. So when we go into the schools, my organization, my girls coordinator, Annika, wave your hand, she spends a lot of time with our girls now. But what I realized when I was younger was that people who would come into the school and celebrate the kids who had accomplishments, really high GPAs, had all the scholarships going to different colleges, but nobody went into the detention at the school. Nobody spent time at the alternative schools. So we spent a lot of time at the alternative schools, and these kids at these schools, we don't listen to kids. We think because we are older and we've been through more, we silence their voice and we do not listen to them. But the thing you said earlier about these kids have the mentality of 25 and 26-year-olds. These kids know what's happening to them. They know how it's making them feel, and they know what they need. I think a lot of times we don't go there and hear what they need because we can't do nothing about it, or you feel like you can't do nothing about it, so you choose to ignore it. But if you take time and you spend time in these alternative schools where we spend a lot of time, these kids will tell you, I got in trouble because I'm late to school, but my mom is a single parent. I have 4 younger siblings. I have to get my siblings to school. I have a baby now that I have to drop off to daycare, and I can't possibly get to school on time. But nobody ever asks me why I'm late. But it's because at the age of 16, I'm taking care of 5 kids to help my mom. They don't ask about the sexual abuse that's going on in their house with a family member. You don't talk about those things. But if you take time to go to these alternative schools and sit with these kids who are exhibiting issues inside of the schools, that's the best preventative interaction and injunction you can take, because you are getting them before they commit the crime once they're put out of school.
Absolutely. We could really go on and on. We have a few minutes left. I do want to ask Mr. Williams this question, then I want to have a question for the entire panel. Heard Troy talk about this as well, is there's been that big debate about when it comes to, prosecuting these crimes. Should we just lock them up, or should we have some type of program or more leniency, especially when it comes to teenagers? You as the man in this parish, prosecuting these crimes and other issues, you've also personally been impacted by this. As we all know, I believe it was a year ago, you and your mother were carjacked by, I believe, 2 or 3 teenagers. Has that situation that you went through impacted the way that you prosecute crimes, especially when it comes to teenagers in this parish?
Not at all. You know, they were young people. They weren't. One person was a teenager. The other two were young adults. And you talk about the frontal lobe; it's all the same thing. I mean, I don't think I was particularly mature until I was about 40 years old. If I'm going to be honest with you. But the truth of the matter is, what I learned from that experience was how trauma can affect you. It has nothing to do with the criminal legal system. It's watching my mom get nervous at 4:30 because it was about to get dark, right? She doesn't want to go out as soon as she sees the sun go down because she associates darkness with what happened, right? So it goes to what we're talking about, these little small things that can change your association with everybody you deal with. And in terms of what we need to do, we need to do everything. We need to prosecute people who are hurting people in this community, whether it's sexual violence or shooters. We need to be aggressive with that. But we also need to make sure that there's a continuum of care, right? A kid's first touch with the criminal legal system might be an opportunity to figure out what is going on in their home, because so many times a young person is a victim of crime long before they are a perpetrator of crime. And we ignore that piece of it. The other thing we're talking about are schools. And oftentimes when we talk about schools, we forget about the number of young people that are not in schools. COVID did a number on us, and we have not even yet addressed what the pandemic has done. Kids trying to learn virtually for a year led to a situation where a lot of kids just either didn't have a good Wi-Fi connection or were embarrassed what was going on the screen behind them, and they've dropped out of school, and they're not back in school. And if kids aren't in school seats, they're in our streets, right? So, and that's not a school problem. That is a city of New Orleans problem. Mayor, city council, reps, everybody's got to get involved with how do we get our young people in a place where we can have them counted, accounted for, and provide the proper interventions that these very smart people are talking about doing. So, you know, being a victim of crime, that's living in New Orleans. That's living in the South. It's living in an urban setting. I wish it hadn't happened, but it did. Didn't change my approach, but it certainly showed me just how quickly it can impact a person's navigation through society. Because my mom will never be the same.
Absolutely, absolutely. Final question for you all. We're going to go, this is our last question, and we're going to go 30 seconds per person just to keep it quick. Your challenge to folks out there, because it's not just about, reps and city leaders, but it's also the community coming together, because it does take a village, right? So start with you, Sarita. What is your message out there to the community to try to help out when it comes to our young people and others to avoid the criminal justice system?
I think everybody should be involved. Everybody should do what they can. Even if you help one person, it makes a tremendous difference. But I want to talk to people who also have been impacted by the legal system. When I was released from prison, I was told a number of things that I couldn't do. And I was also told by close family members they thought I was going to go back to prison. I just want to leave something with you. If you've been impacted, you have a conviction, do not allow the lack of imagination of somebody else to kill your dreams. You can do whatever it is that you set your mind, your heart, and your soul to. You're gonna have to work hard. It's not gonna be easy. You're gonna be told no numerous times, and the system is set up for you to fail. But you cannot let what other people think about you and what you have done determine your course in life. You absolutely cannot. People in prison are some of the most ingenuitive people that I have ever met in my life. They just do not have access, and they don't have access to resources and being able to change your life. Do not allow what others think of you stop you from becoming who you were meant to be.
Well said. Mary.
Yeah, I'll say two things. One, there's this saying that we always say, it takes a village to take care of a child, and we never talk about who the village is, right? So I think my challenge is, one, to be the village that it takes to take care of our kids. And sometimes that's a listening ear, sometimes that's a ride to school. For me, growing up, when I didn't have anything and two sisters, that was my neighbor saying, like, Troy, we cooked dinner, like, do y'all want a plate? And as embarrassing as that was, like, we took the plate because we needed it. And the second thing I'll say is, like, vote. I mean, elections are consequential. They are very, very impactful. And in a city like New Orleans, where our local elections impact our day-to-day, every day. If you decide to skip out because you don't feel like it's going to affect you, or if you're tired of it, I'm tired of it too, but I still get up and vote. So I would challenge folks to really center in on voting and not just listening to what social media says. Listen directly to what the people who are running for office say, the folks who have a track record of supporting our communities and the people we love, and put that energy toward them.
I'll start where Troy ended, just to reemphasize the importance of elections and how consequential they are. I started off talking about this new governor. Number one issue, called a special session on crime. We all want our community safer, but he went about it in a much different way than our previous governor, which I agreed with. So that's a clear illustration of how elections matter and elections have consequences, so it's worth reemphasizing that. The other part is, for us, I would say my challenge is, let's never lose sight of seeing the humanity in one another. When someone ends up in the system, let's just say that, whether it's a young person or someone who comes out as an adult, I think we have this idea that they're two separate worlds. They might be on some level, but most people at some point will return home. I'd say, what is it, like 80, 85% or so people who end up in the system will return home. So I think it's important for us to never lose sight of the humanity of one another, and then we can approach these policies in a different way other than simply, okay, these are the criminals and these are the people who don't break laws. I think that is what influences a lot of decision making in the space that I work in, and I think it's why we continue to fail, right? So when I try to bring laws and policies, I think it's just easy to kind of sweep it under the rug because it's like, oh, this guy, he's just trying to hug all of the criminals. He's trying to just, be there, when that's really not the case. No, I think these things actually will make our community safer when our young people feel seen and loved, and when they're invested in, and when we promote education, and when we promote mental health services, and when we promote opportunities for people to choose better things. That's what people want. They want opportunities. They want a better life. So let's never lose sight of that. And this is coming from somebody who believes firmly in accountability. There must be accountability, and it has to be swift. But if it's not done with intentionality, if it's not done with a sense of seeing the humanity in these people, then I think we're just going to continue to repeat the mistakes of the past.
Mr. Williams, well said.
I would say, we got to be careful with labels. Labels we put on people, labels we let that we allow to be put on us, labels we put on things. Criminal justice reform and public safety are not antithetical. These are not two opposing things. They're the same side of one coin. You cannot have a safe place if people don't trust and have confidence in the union that exists, right? So in 2023, when New Orleans was the murder capital of the world, we were embarking on the most robust criminal justice reform effort that the South had seen on the cusp of an international pandemic. 2023, City of New Orleans brought crime down lower and faster in every single category than any other city in this country and any other parish in this state, while engaging in criminal justice reform and bringing home wrongfully accused people, bringing home people who were in jail for too long for 2 joints, bringing home people who were in jail because they were close to a guy who did a thing, right? So we confronted the sins of the past and brought people home who should not have been there for life, right? Saving the state millions of dollars. We prosecuted and sent violent people away at that same time. So we created a safe space by building trust in a community. And I want people to not lose sight of 2023. Before the gubernatorial election, what we did in this city has not happened anywhere else. And the other thing I want to say about young people, we have to pay attention to them before they're in the system. I've got 3 kids, 2 I share blood with, 1 I don't, right? All these children in this community are ours, and we have to treat them like they're ours. There's no difference between a gang and Son of a Saint. There's no difference between a gang, Crips and Bloods, and a church. It's a place where people feel like someone has their back. So we need to make sure that the children of New Orleans know that good, compassionate adults have their backs and will be there for them.
Sheriff.
Yeah, I want to kind of echo what everybody said here. Building the village, that's what I'm working on now. It's my job to hold people until they face justice and to make sure that justice can function at the courts. But while I got them in custody, let's work with our village on them. So, Ms. Steyer, Mary, I see Goodwill, Renee Gilpratt out there. I see Nola Keys out there. We have a village out there that can help people get to someplace else. It's my job as the sheriff, and you may not think that's the sheriff's job, but I know my job in helping have a safe community is to help build this support structure, which is usually a family. So we want to strengthen the families of those in our custody so they have somewhere to go. When we strengthen families, we strengthen children, which we've all talked about here. When we have safe and strong children, we have a safe and strong community. So that's what we all need to work on that together, and I am dedicated to doing that, building this village.
Awesome. Special thank you to our panelists for coming today from their busy schedules. Thank you all so much for listening. Hope you guys learned a lot today. And also, one thing I want to say finally, if you are at home at any point, Monday through Friday, be sure to watch WDS News this morning from 4:30 to 7 a.m. All right, thank you all so much. We have one more thing to wrap us up before we leave.
All right, amen. Come on, let's give it up one more time for our fantastic panel, as well as our host, Mr. Darrell Forges. Come on, let's give him another hand clap of praise on today. All right, at this time, we're going to break out into our breakout sessions. We're going to have session 1 will be mental health with facilitator Mary Elford, going to be right here in the sanctuary. Session 2 will be employment and housing with Troy Glover. That will be in the gymnasium. And session 3 is going to be resources with Montrell. That will be in the room adjacent to the gymnasium. We can all disperse at this time, but before we leave, our group panelists, please don't leave the stage just yet. We're going to get a group photo. Oh, it's going to be Sarita. Okay, I'm sorry, y'all. Instead of Montrell, it's going to be Miss Sarita in the room adjacent to the gymnasium.
And a big thanks to Pastor Everett and the church. Thank you.
Yeah, one more thing. Let's give it up for our bishop-elect, y'all.